Dear friends, thank you so much, Dr. Shetty, for the introduction. Mine is the last session in general surgery, and the topics are very many, so I will try to complete each one as briefly as possible. The first topic, which is very important to all of us, is hemorrhage and its management. We should all remember that whatever is important in the clinical side only is important also for the exams. So asking what is important in exams is not really necessary. Hemorrhage is very important in surgery because all our patients, either they come to us because they have had an injury or they come to us to get operated. And hemorrhage can be a problem in any of these cases. Next. What is hemorrhage? Hemorrhage denotes the escape of blood from a blood vessel. Any damage to the vasculature leads to the outflow of blood. Blood carries oxygen. We all know that blood carries oxygen and nutrients to the tissues and is vital for body functions. Loss of blood due to any reason beyond a certain point is potentially a life-threatening problem and may lead to exsanguination of blood, leading to even death at times. So it's very dangerous. Next. Now, show the top of the slide. Classification of hemorrhage. This is a question which comes in your papers fairly frequently, and students choose the easiest classification, that is the nature of the bleeding vessel. But there are other better classifications also. The first one is depending on the source of bleeding. It may be external hemorrhage when the bleeding is revealed and it's seen outside, like epistaxis, which is bleeding from the nose, or it may be internal hemorrhage, bleeding concealed and not seen outside, like an intracranial hematoma. We don't see it, but it can cause a lot of damage. Next classification is depending on the nature of the bleeding vessel. Arterial hemorrhage is bright red in color, blood emitted as a jet with each heartbeat. Venous hemorrhage is dark red in color because there is deoxygenated blood. The blood flow is steady and smooth. And capillary hemorrhage, the color is bright red in color, and there's a generalized oozing of blood instead of the flowing of blood. Next. No, still higher. The third classification, which is really very important, is depending upon the time of hemorrhage. Primary hemorrhage is one which occurs at the time of trauma or surgery. That means operation. Reactionary hemorrhage occurs within 24 hours of trauma or any operation, generally within 6 to 8 hours of surgery. Then the third one is secondary hemorrhage, which occurs after 7 to 14 days of trauma or operation. Primary hemorrhage is due to injury to the blood vessels, and we can see it in front of our eyes. And the reactionary hemorrhage is also very dangerous because it occurs when the patient is shifted to the wards or he's in the recovery room. It's a hemorrhage which occurs, and there are reasons for this, because the BP comes up after the anesthesia effects wear off. The BP of the patient starts coming up. Small vessels open up, and that is very dangerous because when the patient coughs or sneezes or even retches or vomits, the vessels open up and bleeding starts. And the third one, very important, is rolling of a ligature, slipping of a ligature. Usually students only mention that one slipping of a ligature. Slipping of a ligature is not that common, it's very rare. The other word for it is rolling of a ligature. It can come in your MCQs, so please see to it that you learn it and remember it. Rolling of a ligature means same as slipping of a ligature. Then the secondary hemorrhage, which occurs after 7 to 14 days of trauma or operation, is always due to infection. Because of infection, the walls of the blood vessels slough off and the bleeding is torrential. So these three are very important, and they come in your MCQs, they come in your SAQ, and they come as part of your LAQs. These days, or for now many years, the LAQ is divided into, we don't just get 2 long answers, we get each answer broken up into 3 or 4 parts. So all these can come in any of the parts of your paper, theory paper. And you can be asked, of course, in the Viva also, theory Viva also, you can be asked all these things. Fourth one is depending upon volume of blood loss. Mild hemorrhage is blood loss which is equal to 500 ml. The next one is moderate, 500 to 1000 ml. And then the severe hemorrhage is blood loss which is beyond one, which is more than 1 liter. Next. It's also the fifth classification is depending upon speed of blood loss. The first one is acute hemorrhage, which is there is massive bleeding in a short span of time. Chronic hemorrhage is slow bleeding, small amounts in quantity for a long time. Like for instance, with piles, hemorrhoids, it is not there in your syllabus, or even because of a chronic duodenal ulcer, which bleeds very slowly. Acute hemorrhage is like what you see in liver cirrhosis or because of the esophageal varices bleeding. It's a very profound bleeding which takes place, and patient can collapse very easily. So it's very difficult to manage these patients of acute hemorrhage. Sixth one, depending upon percentage of blood loss. This is the classification. Class 1 is up to 15% of blood loss. Class 2 is between 15 and 30%. Class 3 is between 30 and 40%, and class 4 is more than 40%. So learn all the classification because it helps in understanding hemorrhage. Next one. Now we come to the etiology of the cause of hemorrhage. Number 1 is of course trauma, that is injury. Number 2 is infections, which are very important. Congenital malformations can give rise to bleeding. Then you have the surgical complications, intraoperative and postoperative. To use the word surgery, I feel very odd to use the word surgery in surgical paper itself, because operation is a better word to use. Surgical means a lot of things. Surgery means a lot of things, just not the operative and post-operative. Then you come to the next one, due to systemic diseases, viral infection, scurvy, which is deficiency of vitamin C, and allergies. Then you come to the next one, abnormalities in clotting factors. You have hemophilia A and hemophilia B and multiple myeloma. And last one, abnormalities in platelets, idiothrombocytopenic purpura, thrombocytosis, thrombocytopenia, also the dengue which was going on. You know, all these conditions can cause a lot of bleeding. Now you come to hemostasis. One of the papers, part of the answer of LAQ was on hemostasis. That is why I'm telling you that learn even the small answers. They help in your managing your LAQs well. All the marks you can get are very important for scoring well. Next one, hemostasis is mechanism of stoppage of extravasation of blood. There are 4 important steps. First point is the injured blood vessel undergoes constriction due to spasm. The second one, there is activation of platelets and formation of the platelet plug. Then you come to the primary hemostasis, which takes place because of the platelet plug. Activation of clotting mechanism and formation of clot leads to completion of the secondary hemostasis and fibrous organization of clot or retraction of the clot. This is the last one. Hemostasis had come in, I think 3 years back or something. I remember this question very clearly. All the students learn hemostasis and coagulation very much in detail in physiology, but see that you brush up all these topics when you come for the exam in surgery, because hemorrhage is a very important topic. Next. So these are the pictures here which show the mechanism of hemostasis down. Mechanism of hemostasis, the first one. The first one is it shows the vasoconstriction which is taking place in the blood vessel. Take this. Second one is primary hemostasis. We said, no, the platelets all join together and form a plug. Then the secondary hemostasis takes place. Thrombin is activated and fibrin polymerization takes place. And then the last one is thrombus and antithrombotic events. Next. This is the mechanism of hemostasis, the complete coagulation which takes place. Now, the process of platelet plug formation at the site of injury is the primary hemostasis, occurs within seconds of injury, very soon, and is important for stoppage of blood from small arterioles, venules, and capillaries. The platelets adhere to the endothelium. They release granules and platelet aggregation, resulting in formation of the primary hemostatic plug. Next. Next one. I want to read the top. Secondary hemostasis starts. Activation of clotting process in plasma that results in formation of fibrin, which strengthens the primary hemostatic plug. It's completed in several minutes and is important in bleeding from larger vessels. Some substances promote clotting and some prevent clotting. They are called anticoagulants. There is a complex interaction of various factors of coagulation in the formation of a clot. Next. So the first reaction, coagulation mechanism can be broken down into series of 4 reactions. First one is intrinsic or contact phase of coagulation. Factor 8, 9, 11, 12 and plasma, proteins and calcium take part in this. Partial thromboplastin time screens this part of the reaction. Reaction 2 is an extrinsic pathway for starting of coagulation. Release of tissue thromboplastin from injured tissues. Protease complex formed between factor 7, calcium and tissue thromboplastin, which activates factor 10. And prothrombin time screens this. That means all these tests are very important. Coagulation profile is very important in patients who in the surgery department, especially if they will be undergoing a surgical procedure. Or of course, if they are suffering from hemorrhage. Reaction 3, factor 10 is activated by proteases generated in the previous 2 reactions. Prothrombin is converted into thrombin in presence of factor 5, calcium and phospholipids. Main role of thrombin is conversion of fibrinogen into fibrin. It also activates factor 5, 8 and 13 and helps in platelet aggregation and secretion. Next one. I'm telling you all these because you cannot say it is physiology, so it will not come in our paper. To understand how to manage a patient in surgery, you have to know anatomy, physiology, and all the other branches too. Then you come to clinical evaluation. A patient who's having a lot of bleeding. History should always include following questions. Is there any personal or family history of bleeding tendency? This is a must in every patient in the surgery OPD and also any patient who comes with hemorrhage. Has the patient undergone surgery, tooth extractions, tonsillectomy, any surgery previously? Any history of hematuria? Hematuria means blood in the urine. Gastrointestinal hemorrhage. Epistaxis, which is bleeding from the nose. What medication is the patient taking or has been taking recently? This question is very important because many patients are now undergoing cardiovascular procedures like stenting and all that, and then they are on anticoagulants. And whenever they have an injury, the bleeding is quite profuse because of this. And it is wrong to think that patient or the relative will volunteer the information. We have to specifically ask the patient about this. We have to also note for any splenomegaly, hepatomegaly, and see the skin and mucosal surfaces. Lab tests we know which we have to do. We have to do bleeding time. We have to do the platelet count, which is very important. Next. Prothrombin time. the normal and the control both will be given to us, and the PTT, partial thromboplastin time. The complete screening of the coagulation profile is very important, especially in patients who are bleeding. Next. Methods of achieving hemostasis. Mechanical methods. First, how do you stop the bleeding? Wherever the bleeding is occurring, how do you stop? The pressure, packing, and position. Those are the 3 P's we always remember. When someone has bleeding, like in the hospital, somebody who's got varicose veins has started bleeding. So you apply pressure with your hand, with your gloved hand. You put a tight dressing on it, and then you raise the legs. That is the position. These are the mechanical methods, the first 3 P's. The second one are the chemical methods. We use adrenaline, thrombin, then we use gel foam. There are other agents which we use, especially the latter, and the bone wax is used at the time of operations. We also give the patient, there are many other agents also, styptics, astringents and all that. But we do, these are the main ones what I mentioned to you. Systemic agents are the whole blood, platelet-rich plasma and fresh frozen plasma, which is called FFP in blood banks, and cryoprecipitate. Thermal agents like cautery is very necessary. Cauterization, when we catch the bleeder, what we say, we hold the bleeder with either artery forceps. We have to either ligate it or cauterize it with the electrocautery. We can use cryosurgery or lasers as well. Immediate pressure for capillary or venous bleeding will stop the bleeding. Firm pressure should be applied over the bleeding site using either fingers or gauze for 5 minutes. This would control most hemorrhages by counteracting the hydrostatic pressure of the bleeding vessel. This is of importance even in the operation theater, when there is profuse bleeding and there is blood welling up from the depths. The answer is not to take the artery forceps and try to catch something in the pool of blood which is coming up, but just put a pack in, wait for 5 minutes by the clock. When you remove the pack, the bleeding would have reduced to a trickle and you can hold the blood vessel. If you start trying to hold a blood vessel when bleeding is occurring, you will damage very important structures. Use of hemostat. Application of hemostat at the bleeding point helps in direct occlusion of the bleeding vessel. Next. Sutures and ligatures. Severed blood vessels may be tied with ligatures. A ligature replaces the hemostat as a permanent method of effective hemostasis, but you have to tie a surgical knot. The surgeon's knot has to be tied, not the other one which slips. And then there is another way, when there are big pulsatile arteries, you go for a fixation suture. The one we use is called the transfixion suture. The one we use for the hernias also. Non-resorbable sutures such as silk and polyethylene are used as they evoke less tissue reaction. This is very important, how you tie the vessels and how you take care of the ligatures, because we don't want any reactionary hemorrhage occurring later on. Next one. Chemical methods, I've already covered it with you, adrenaline and thrombin. Next one. Gel foam is also used. Next one. Gel foam is used very commonly in the operation theater. It is formed from purified pork skin gelatin. It's completely absorbable. It has the capacity to absorb 45 times its weight in blood, and it resorbs completely in 4 to 6 weeks. Same as gel foam. These are the same kinds of oxidized cellulose polymer product. This is Oxycell. It's an absorbable hemostatic material, and it's applied on the dry surface as the acid formed during the wetting process inactivates the thrombin. Platelets plug into its mesh-like surface and helps in clot formation. We have fibrin glue also and microfibrillar collagen. Styptics and astringents are also used to stop the bleeding. These are all many methods of stopping, but the main ones I have told you. Next one. Fibrin sponge. It's obtained from bovine material. It's chemically treated to avoid allergic reaction. See, this is another problem with these substances. Next one. Bone wax we very commonly use. It's used in orthopedics. It's sterilized. It's non-absorbable mix of waxes. It consists of 7 parts by weight of white beeswax, paraffin wax, and an isopropyl ester of palmitic acid, 2 parts of olive oil, and 1 part of phenol. It is indicated in cases of bleeding from the bone. There is no other way of stopping the bleeding from the bone, and this is highly effective. It is softened with the fingers to decide consistency and then applied over the bleeding site. Its hemostatic mechanism is through mechanical obstruction of the osseous cavity containing the bleeding vessels. Systemic agents are whole blood. Fresh whole blood refers to blood that is administered within 24 hours of its donation. We get patients lined up, especially those who are undergoing procedures for problem like idiothrombocytopenic purpura, all those conditions. Patients are cross-matched before the patient undergoes surgery and they are ready. The fresh whole blood will contain clotting factors. So it is necessary also when there is excessive blood loss. It contains all factors of coagulation. Of course, all the tests have to be done. No blood is given for transfusion. No patient is transfused with blood which has not been thoroughly checked. Platelet-rich plasma. Platelets can be collected from donated whole blood. Concentrates are viable for 3 days when stored at room temperature. They are infused very quickly via short transfusion sets. 1 unit raises the platelet count by approximately 7,000 to 10,000 cells per cubic millimeter. See, these are generally for patients who are very critically ill. Next. Fresh frozen plasma. Stored at minus 30 degrees centigrade, it should be infused within 2 hours once defrosted. It's very cold, you have to defrost it. Unit of fresh frozen plasma from 1 donor is collected and it contains all coagulation factors. Next one is cryoprecipitate, stored at minus 30 degrees centigrade. And this is also given, but you have to check. When you go for fresh blood transfusion, you have to see that you check for any evidence of viral disease. Next. Thermal agents. Cautery is used. Heat is transmitted from instrument by conduction directly to the tissues and the tissue is burnt. When we burn the tissue with an electrocautery, we should make sure that with the forceps, we only hold the bleeding end. We cannot hold chunks of tissue because then either it gets cauterized and also it becomes a nidus for infection if you hold chunks of tissue and get it cauterized. Next. Finished. Electrocautery. Electrocautery is the same thing what I told you now. Cautery point is touched to the hemostat or to the forceps which is causing the sealing of the vessel. It causes tissue destruction and there is a burning smell and smoke during application. Electrocautery permits any degree of hemorrhage control. It provides clear and improved view, increases efficiency, reduces the time, and gives pressure-less cutting. Then you come to cryosurgery. Cryosurgery, we don't use it very much here. Those who use it for hemostasis as well, and laser, of course. Lasers give us a very bloodless field for surgery. They effectively coagulate the small blood vessels during cutting of tissues. Next. Shock. Now we come to the management of the hemorrhage. We have already seen how we see management of hemorrhage has many components. First component is you have to assess the patient. When the patient comes into the casualty, there are many people managing the patient. One person will assess the patient, another patient will, one doctor will assess the patient, another doctor will get the patient, will try to stop the bleeding, and the third one will get an IV line inside. It is the principles of management are for any traumatic case, like what we say, ABC. I think you all know it. What is ABC? When a serious patient, critical patient comes into the casualty, you have to apply ABC. That is, the airway should be clear, the breathing should be good, and the circulation line should be established. That is very important. So now we come to the different types of hemorrhage. We have already seen mild hemorrhage, moderate hemorrhage, and all that. Mild hemorrhage, when blood loss is less than 500 ml, it is called mild hemorrhage. 10% of blood volume is present in the splanchnic circulation. When there is blood loss of 500 ml, peripheral venoconstriction takes place. Some amount of blood volume is corrected by withdrawal of fluid from interstitial space. This is the mild hemorrhage when the bleeding is 500 ml or less. The second one is moderate hemorrhage when loss of 500 ml to 1 liter of blood results in moderate hemorrhage. Peripheral vasoconstriction takes place, but it's not enough to maintain the circulation. So the adrenaline and noradrenaline functions start taking over. They are released from the sympathoadrenal system. Increased secretion of ADH, antidiuretic hormone, causes retention of water and salt. Clinically, it results in the patient's extremities being cold and clammy, feeble or absent peripheral pulses, and increased in BP due to an increase in peripheral resistance. The renal vessels undergo vasoconstriction. So because of this, there is inadequate renal perfusion, which is very dangerous. It can go into acute renal failure. Untreated cases develop into acute renal tubular necrosis. Severe hemorrhage is lost more than 1 liter. All the symptoms and signs of the second stage become worse. Pulse races, there's severe tachycardia, even above 140, feeble low volume, hypertension is present, and oliguria. Normal urine output is 1 cc per kilogram of body weight per hour. That is normal. Otherwise, it should be more than 500 ml in 24 hours. But in critical patients, we need to know the output of urine every hour. Next. Now you come to the treatment of the shock. I told you the first thing is you stop the bleeding. They are all done simultaneously. Assessment of the patient, stoppage of the bleeding, then getting the intravenous cannula inside, catheterizing the patient. We have to catheterize them to know what is the urine output per kilogram per hour. You have to find out the arterial blood gases and see if the oxygenation is adequate. And then if necessary, we will start with dopamine for renal vasodilatation. Other methods we have already seen. Control of hemorrhage is over. So though the question may be asked differently to you, if you are asked about treatment or management of hemorrhage, you must mention all the aspects of managing of hemorrhage, not just the stoppage of bleeding. Stoppage of bleeding is only one part of it. And then you have to take care of the circulation. You have to take care that the lungs don't go into what we call as loss of surfactant interstitial edema. That is, multi-organ failure will ultimately develop. Because when patient develops shock, there is hypoperfusion of the tissues. So because of that, the metabolism becomes anaerobic and you get a lot of lactic acidosis taking place. So this is the pathology we will have to try to circumvent. No, sorry. Shock is over. Next. When you come to the clinical features, we've already done all this. We've taken a good history. Physical examination has to be very quick and thorough. Heart rate and rhythm, quality of pulse, blood pressure, pallor. Patient who's bleeding profusely always is very pale. Body temperature is only elevated in septic shock, but the skin is cold in others. There is cyanosis may be present. Signs of ventricular failure may be also observed, like the presence of the third heart sound, signs of dehydration will be there. The loss of skin turgor, dry tongue, and sunken eyeball are very important. Also, insertion of lines, intravenous lines, either central means going into the central veins in the heart when we want to measure the central venous pressure, or peripheral. Peripheral means just you cannulate the peripheral vein. By percutaneous cut down needs to be inserted for rapid infusion of fluids and drugs. Urinary bladder should be always catheterized because it's very important to know the urine output. Monitoring, continuous monitoring of all these parameters, heart rate, rhythm, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, urine output, and cardiac injury enzymes. Nowadays, we can check cardiac injury enzymes with a TROP-T test. Chest X-ray, serum electrolytes is very important. That's all. Next. Also sinus fistula. Yeah?
Blood transfusion complications.
Blood transfusion complications. There's one more topic which I will not be taking with you in detail because of paucity of time. It is the complication of blood transfusions, because complications are very important when you give blood to a patient. What students should realize is blood is very dangerous. So do not give it unless it's absolutely necessary. This is sweet. Yeah. Sweet. When a patient gets a reaction at the time of blood transfusion, when you get the blood bag from the blood bank, always check there is a double paper which is put over there on the bag. You can always see the name of the patient, whether all the tests are done, what is the blood group. Everything is very clearly written over there. One part the counterfoil has to be detached and stuck on the patient's case paper. It is very important to do this, and the doctor treating the patient is supposed to do this. So the reactions or the complications of blood transfusions occur because of some problem of cross-matching or infection, or or ABO incompatibility. There may be a lot of reasons. When you bring the blood back to the ward, just keep it on the table and don't try to shake it. Don't put it in hot water. The temperature will start becoming higher just to the room temperature. Blood transfusion reaction is a systemic response by the body to blood incompatible with that of recipient. It is mainly caused due to ABO incompatibility and allergic reactions to the other blood cells in the blood. Potassium or citrate preservative in the blood. Next. Types of blood transfusion reactions are very important. Acute hemolytic transfusion reaction, delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction, pyrogenic because of pyrogens in the collection set or in the blood administration set, allergic reactions, anaphylactic reactions, and transmission of infective diseases. Next. Complications, the other complications are circulatory overload. If you have a patient of renal failure, you can't give whole blood transfusion. You have to just give the patient PCV, packed cells. Or if you're having a patient of very severe anemia, you have to go for packed cells. The other complication is hyperkalemia or high potassium content which is present in the stored blood. So you have to be very careful about all these things. Hypocalcemia, low calcium, and you have to treat it immediately. Hemosiderosis, we never give any drug through the blood transfusion administration set. Then there may be hemosiderosis, infiltration and hematoma, thrombophlebitis, or pulmonary embolism. Acute hemolytic transfusion reaction develops during the first 5 to 15 minutes. Hemolytic transfusion reaction, if it is present You have to immediately stop the administration of blood. Whenever there's a reaction, we stop it, send it back to the blood bank along with another sample of the blood, and you get it checked again. Do not expose the blood and give it through the same IV administration set as IV fluids. Acute hemolytic transfusion reaction will come with fever, chills, headache, dyspnea, cyanosis, chest pain. Also, there is nausea and vomiting. There is increased heart rate and respiratory rate, hemoglobinuria. Complications include hypertension followed by shock. It's a very dangerous reaction which can occur, so you have to take care of the patient and see that the oliguria doesn't proceed to anuria followed by renal failure, acute renal failure. Next. Then you have to observe the patient for the first 10 minutes, discontinue, of course, inform the lab to do the cross matching, not the lab, the blood bank, maintain IV infusion with the IV fluids like glucose or saline, 5% glucose or normal saline. Large quantities of fluid is given to promote diuresis and counteract shock. Monitor vital signs every 15 minutes to assess shock and collapse. This is why I wanted to take this, and it comes in your paper as a, generally it comes as a short note. Next. Medical management of the reaction, large quantities of fluid, mannitol, heparinization if necessary, oxygen and adrenaline, sedation, blood transfusion, and hemodialysis. Hemodialysis is, a patient is subject to hemodialysis only if his kidneys completely go into shutdown. But this is acute, this is an acute problem. Next. Delayed reaction, it comes after some time, develops days to weeks after transfusion, featured by persistent decrease in hemoglobin level and low-grade fever. And many times this reaction is missed and people don't realize that the blood transfusion has something to do with it. Next. Pyrogenic develops within 6 hours of infusion, results from pyrogenic substances from the tubes. Causes are improper preparation of donor site, not following proper aseptic technique, and improper refrigeration and improper handling of blood. You're not supposed to shake the blood bag and then administer it to the patient. Allergic reaction develops any time or within 1 hour of transfusion. Allergic reaction are the results of sensitivity of individual to the plasma protein in the transfused blood. It is characterized by itching, rashes, laryngeal edema, and bronchial spasm in severe cases. Treatment normally includes injections of antihistaminics and corticosteroids. We have to also, the anaphylactic reactions are very life-threatening. So you have to be very careful when you monitor the patient. They are generally monitored in the intensive care unit of the hospital. Next. The others are all which we already know, the complications. Any disease which is transmitted, no? Like if there are organisms which are transferred, disease causing factors which are transmitted to the patient, you have to take care of the patient. But generally they do not complain of that because they are not aware of this kind of complication of blood transfusion. Next. Circulatory overload, very important. Giving a whole blood to patient with severe anemia is very dangerous, and also to patients with heart failure and kidney failure. Next. Prevention of circulatory overload, we used packed RBCs, transfuse blood at a slow rate, and patient has to be monitored very carefully every 15 minutes and check the CVP. The CVP goes very high. You have to start taking measures to reduce it. Hyperkalemia, you have to treat for the high level of potassium. Patient will have to be given, you'll have to stop the transfusion because hyperkalemia will stop the heart. To start giving the patient glucose and insulin, which will transfer the potassium into the cell. Hypocalcemia is usually due to citrate toxicity. During massive transfusion, citrates in the blood combined with ionized calcium and tetany may result. Treatment consists of administration of calcium gluconate to prevent or eliminate the toxic effects by neutralizing the acidosis. Calcium is never given through the same tube as the blood. And calcium, when we give it intravenously, you have to monitor the pulse and give it minimum over a period of half an hour. Because if you give it fast, there may be a cardiac arrest. Next. That's all for this topic. Now we go to the next one. Next.